I do wish that the TV show had followed more of the comic book, especially for my character. And gonna get me in a little trouble, but the person in charge that year had never read the comic book. And so I don't think he really understood how far off the rails he was going in terms of what I think the fans really loved.
Okay, guys. So recently there was a convention held in France, and some of our lovely former Walking Dead cast were in attendance. And the question was asked whether there was any storylines that the actors felt they wish their characters would have been able to carry out that they were not able to do because they left the show too early or whatever. Well, Laurie Holden made an interesting statement, which harkens back to another interesting statement that she made. Now I'm going to read what she said formally. Then I'm going to let you hear what she said recently at the convention in France. And then I'm going to let you hear what the creator of the Walking Dead television series, we know the creator of the comic book is Robert Kirkman, but it was adapted to television by Frank Darabont. So let me read the statement that Lauren made. Can find it. Yes. Lauren made a few years ago at a convention in New Jersey. It was the Walker Stalker convention, and it was a few years ago. And this is what she was quoted. I think I saw a video of her making the statement, but I don't have that video, so I cannot quote her directly. But I read an article that quoted her, and I'll read the quote that they wrote. And it stated, Laurie Holden stated, I had an 8-year deal. I was supposed to be there until the end. I was supposed to end up with Rick. That's the part that caught my attention because this statement was said after she was let go from The Walking Dead and Rick and Michonne were officially made a couple on the television series. So this statement came after Rick and Michonne got together on the television show. The person quoting her stated she said, I was supposed to save Woodbury on a horse and I was buying a house in Atlanta. I got the call at 10 o'clock the night before while I was shooting from the showrunner who is no longer a part of The Walking Dead, saying that they couldn't write the episode and that he was killing my character. So we all got the script. Everybody on the set was sobbing. I felt like I got shot. None of it was supposed to happen the way it did. So you can't fault someone for their sentiments, expressing what they experienced and what they hoped. But this is the part that stuck with me. I was supposed to end up with Rick. She said, I had an 8-year deal. I was supposed to be there until the end. I was supposed to end up with Rick. Now, listen to what she said recently at this convention in France.
My question is mostly towards Emily and Laurie because you can't just like Laurie. I wanted to ask if there is any storyline that you wanted to see your characters in. That's something that happened after the death and wish to see your characters. For Laurie and Emily? Yeah, but everybody can like answer, but mostly for Laurie and James.
I just wish that, and listen, hindsight's 2020, and I'm grateful for the journey that I had, and I think that I like that at least that I died with dignity with my friends, and I think that that's a nice, beautiful closure. However, I do wish that the TV show had followed more of the comic book because I think that there was wonderful storytelling in there and great narrative, especially for my character. And gonna get me in a little trouble, but the person in charge that year had never read the comic book. And so I don't think he really understood how far off the rails he was going in terms of what I think the fans really loved. And mind you, there's a lot of beautiful things that Scott Gimple and Angela Kang have done since then and fabulous storytelling. I just think in terms of me and time own journey that I wish that it followed more of the the pure narrative that Robert Kirkman wrote.
So, in essence, she wanted Andrea to have the story that Andrea had in the comic books, right? And in the story, in the comic books, Robert Kirkman put Rick with Andrea after he was contemplating putting Rick with Michonne. Now, listen to the creator of the Walking Dead TV show's plan. Remember, the TV show is an adaptation of the comic, and this was the plan, regardless of what the comics did or didn't do or planned to do and ended up doing. This is the plan of the creator of the show. And his plan for Lauren's character, Andrea, the man that started it all, whatever character Bibles he wrote for each character, this is his statement. And I'll read that for you because Frank Darabont gave an extensive interview with slashfilm.com. And in this interview, he explicitly confirmed that he never, ever intended to pair Rick and Andrea romantically. Frank Darabont states that his plan was that Andrea's relationship with Dale would blossom into a very deep May-December situation, a real marriage. He said no. N-O. He said she was never intended to be a love interest for Rick, as he read somewhere. So even if Andrea was not killed in the show and continued in her arc, she would never, ever be put in a romantic relationship with Rick. And aside from what the showrunner and subsequent showrunners planned, because when Glenn Mazzara, who she intimated earlier, left, the next showrunner was Scott Gimple. And it is in season 4 that we saw the seeds planted for Rick and Michonne to become a couple. So if the first showrunner, the creator of the television series, did not intend it, and the second showrunner definitely did not intend it because he's the one that got rid of Andrea, and the third showrunner did not intend it, it would not have happened. Yes, Andrea would have an arc and would continue in the show for some time if the show was not canceled and if the show continued to be as successful as it did after Andrea left the series. Yes, she would have had a longer arc, but it would not be an arc that followed exactly the comics, which is what she wishes would have happened, but it would not have happened even if she lived, because it was never the intention of any of the showrunners before or after that her story arc would go the way of the comics. We know for sure it would not, because Rick's arc would not converge with her arc. And for the fans of the character Andrea, who loves to use this line of argument that if Frank Darabont had not left the show, that Andrea and Rick would have gotten together and Andrea's arc would have ended up the same as in the comics, and love to use that argument to weaponize against Rick and Michonne's relationship and arc, that's just a losing argument, because Rick and Andrea is only canonized in the comics. So continuing to belabor and weaponize the comic storyline against Rick and Michonne's storyline in the television show will continue to be a losing argument, because the television show is not the comic. The television show was adapted, inspired by the comics, but from day one, the creator had different ideas. And from what I've seen from my observation, sentiments of the general audience, Andrea in the show was never a good fit for Rick Grimes. nor was Rick Grimes a good fit for Andrea in the television show. When I was looking for the interviews with Frank Darabont about the Andrea character, Google brought up some comments in Reddit. I don't use Reddit, but I did read the comments from Reddit, and this is what some of the posters stated. I like Laurie Holden as an actress, didn't care for her character of Andrea at all. Another poster said she was also pretty good in The Mist. Another said Mazzara ruined season 3. And another said, I knew this was happening. The way she did her interviews, I knew she was upset about her demise. And it wasn't supposed to go down that way. And the way her character was handled in season 3, absolutely awful. This actually infuriates me. Keep in mind, pretty much all people that sign on to TV shows sign multi-year deals, except for major stars. These deals are exclusively for the benefit of the producers. That person is right. They are locking people in for multiple years so they can't leave if they get popular or want to do other work. But there's no guarantee that they will actually be on the series for the duration of the term. That's also correct. The show might be cancelled. They might get written out of it, which is what happened. Just because you signed that 8-year deal means nothing. The person goes on to say, also, I guess she says 8 years here, but in reality, 8-year contracts are illegal. The longest contract you can sign in Hollywood is 7 years. It's the Olivia de Havilland law, the same thing that prevented the director of Boyhood from locking down his cast for the whole duration of the 12-year shoot. He just had to hope they stuck with it. It's also how Prince was finally able to get out of his contract with Sony. It could only run for 7 years. If a show becomes popular, actors can and will try to negotiate raises, but typically they aren't that huge until the duration of the original contract is up, and then they can command huge raises. It's how each of the cast of Friends got huge raises after, I think, the 5th season. All that aside, I like her character. Another said, thank God this didn't happen. While there's a lot to blame Mazzara for, honestly, I think the Andrea character was screwed from the moment they cast a woman in her early 40s, but still wrote her as if she was in her early 20s. Finding out that Andrea started the comics at 25 blew my mind. Suddenly, all the things that bothered me about the way her character behaved made so much sense. Not that there are no mature 25-year-olds and immature 40-year-olds, but still, I didn't know anything about her age. So I don't know if this person is correct or not, but it's an opinion. They went on to say, I do think making her older was a good call, especially if they were considering keeping her first relationship from the comics, but they should have matured up her writing a little instead of being brash and idealistic. That's a perfect way to describe Andrea. Was always searching for a word that would encapsulate that character, and I just could never put my finger on it. But that word brash says it all. They said instead of being brash and idealistic, as I think was intended, she comes across as abrasive, another great term to describe Andrea. She comes across as abrasive and almost willfully naive. Yeah, especially in regards with the governor. Poor Laurie Holden. By all accounts, she's a lovely person. She and Andrea deserved better. Another person said, whoa, I had no idea. That character makes much more sense as a 25-year-old than a 40-year-old. I really disliked Andrea on the show and wasn't sorry at all when they killed her off. Abrasive and willfully naive is a great description of how I saw her and why it was annoying. Someone said, glad they killed her off, honestly. She was so annoying. Another said, even her death was annoying. I remember thinking, just get over it already. Ouch. Another person says, I'm honestly not too upset about the show's lack of Andrea. Rick and Michonne make more sense together in my opinion. Hey, I couldn't agree more. Both in terms of chemistry, even so, I agree with this person even more here too, both in terms of chemistry and from a storytelling standpoint. I just think it's unfortunate that Laurie Holden was given such poor material to work with because she'll probably catch crap about Andrea forever. Another person stated the show made the right call here. They had so deftly written her character into the ground. I don't think there was any way to redeem her and make her evolution into the hard-willed and decisive leader she would need to be for her survival as one of the few remaining originals to feel believable and not shoehorned. Couple that with how she likely would have had zero chemistry with Andrew Lincoln on a relationship level. Yeah, some of the comments get a little bit more harsh, and I'm not here to rag on Laurie Holden or even the character Andrea, who I found extremely annoying. But to point out that aside from Laurie's wishes that her character follow the fate of the character in the comics, meaning she would have continued with the show for a very long time and she would have ended up with Rick Grimes. But in spite of what she wished and in spite of what she said at the Walker Stalker convention, in which it was attributed that she stated that Andrea would have ended up with Rick, I just wanted to point out that Andrea was never going to end up with Rick in the show. One, because it was never what the creator of the show intended, and the subsequent showrunners never intended for Rick to be paired with Andrea romantically. And aside from that, that was not the wish of the actor who portrayed Rick Grimes. We saw the seeds and the slow burn progression of Rick and Michonne's relationship on the show. We saw very early on that these two characters were always intended to be together, and the relationship that Carl and Michonne formed and how Michonne became a family with Carl and Rick would have been a very different arc and show if Andrea had remained. It would not look anything like what the comics looked like for that character. I think the character that comes closest to what Andrea's arc would be in a show if Andrea stuck around would be Sasha. I don't know who they would have paired her with. Well, we know if Frank Darabont had stayed in the show, she would be paired with Dale, and for a very long time, and not ended up with Rick, even though Andrea was with Dale in the comics and ended up with Rick after Dale died. But who's to say that Frank Darabont would have gone the same route for Dale? We do know, we have confirmation from Frank Darabont's mom, he was not going to go the way of Andrea in the comics with Rick. So we know that for sure. Also, it was the express desire of the leading man of the show, portrayer of Rick Grimes, for Rick Grimes to end up with Michonne. So I don't know what Andrea long-term in The Walking Dead would look like, but I just wanted to do this video preemptively because I know, because I've been in The Walking Dead fandom since the beginning, and I heard it all, especially from the Andrea fans who love to weaponize the comics against Rick and Michonne. Frank Darabont gave an interview and explicitly claimed that would not have come about. So there you go. Her statements in France were interesting, and I do understand as an actor wanting to see your character's arc play out and wanting to continue on such a fabulous show, wanting the show to be adapted exactly in accordance of the comics is not an unreasonable desire and not a wish that I would hold against her. Also, in that case, if it went that way, she would eventually be killed off the show, and so would Rick Grimes. So I'm very grateful that the show did not go the way of the comics, and I think the show was better written, especially the first 4.5 seasons, that first half of season 5. I think the show was brilliant. Rick and Michonne were the best pairing for their characters, and they turned out to be the best pairing for the show and the best pairing to me in television history, and went on to even greater heights in the series The Ones Who Live. And the piece de resistance, the cherry on top of the TV show not being a faithful adaptation to the comics, Rick Grimes lives. I have no arguments against that, because Rick Grimes not continuing in the comics is what killed the comics, in my humble opinion. So, what do you think of Lauren's statement? Both the ones that she made years ago at Walker Stalker and the one she made recently at the convention in France. And what do you think of Frank Darabont's statement from Slasher.com where he stated his intentions for the character of Andrea? Please let me know. Leave your comments below. I read every single one of them and I'm eager to hear from you. Don't forget to like and subscribe and I'll see you on the next video. Bye.